Okay, perfect. So, good evening and welcome everybody to the September edition of JoziPUG. Let me just bring this here and minimize this. So, as usual, just some logistics. Please make sure you are staying on mute unless you are asking a question. That being said, I'm sure none of the presenters mind being interrupted while they are busy with something unless they specifically say. Rather get the question out when it is fresh in your mind and we have the context of the question. It usually works out a lot better that way. If it is your first time speaking, just mention your name so we know who is speaking. It just makes it a little bit easier. Otherwise, feel free to use the raise hands feature or ask questions in the meeting chat. We will be keeping an eye on both of those. As I mentioned before the recording started, we are recording the session and these will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you will be able to go back and view these should you either have to drop off earlier or you just want to go back and see some of the previous sessions which we've held. Okay. So the agenda for today, firstly, we are starting earlier. We're starting at 4 o'clock. We're giving this a try. Rather than starting it much later at 6 o'clock and only finishing at 8 o'clock, we decided to shift it up a little bit, gauge, see what it's like, and then we'll adjust it accordingly depending on what the feedback's like. So we're first going to start off with some new items in the news. I will be covering that. Then we've got a guest speaker joining us, and they're going to be talking around tips and tricks for creating good-looking Power Apps, so UX and UI development, to give you some ideas on how you can make really good-looking applications. David's then got a nice tech tip for us to help us prevent Power Automate from going into infinite loops. This is a problem, especially when you are building our complex workflows, so he's got some tips to share with that. And then we'll be finishing off with Michael's Cookbook. He's got some questions that he asks us and we try and answer as much as possible, just to help share some of the knowledge, share some context, share some of the things that we've and the challenges that we've maybe run into to help you avoid them in the future. And then we'll just open it up to general questions and discussions at the end of the session. Okay. So to start off with in the news, and I want to thank Michael for sending a lot of these things through, most of them through last week. I really appreciate it. You made my job a lot easier to do. So first off, Microsoft Ignite for 2020 has been announced. We are doing it slightly differently due to COVID, obviously, where Ignite used to be a week-long conference that took place in Orlando. We've now moved it to a digital event, and we've broken it up into 2 sections. On the 22nd, from the 22nd till the 24th, we're having a 48-hour event running. So it's going to be continuous starting on the 22nd, 48 hours up until the 24th. And then we will be having a second Ignite session in early 2021. Registrations are already open. So they opened up on the 3rd. So go to microsoft.com/events. And you'll be able to register on there. Ignite's always, there's a lot of great resources that you can get from Ignite. There's a lot of great content that is shared. It is really an awesome event, and it's going to be interesting to see how this translates into the digital world. The other great thing about Ignite now is it's completely free. In the past, it was a couple $100. Translated was a couple of $1,000 to go to the event, and that excluded plane tickets and everything else. So this is a real great opportunity for absolutely anyone to join. We've already attended a couple of 48-hour events. They are great. There's a lot of great insights out in there. There may be a couple of repeat events just to make sure that we can cover all the time zones, but check it out, register, and you'll get some great info in there. Okay. I'm just checking the chat window to see if there's anything important. Okay, so I think it was the last session that Mike presented to us on DataFlex, which is bringing the CDS capabilities into Teams. Now, as we've mentioned before, we were still looking at the name. There was problems with it. So from now, what we are referring to is Project Oakdale. So this whole concept of bringing in relational databases into Microsoft Teams for us to build apps on top of and chatbots and everything else, this is now what we're going to be referring to as Project Oakdale. And over the coming months, as there are more developments coming through and as we start getting access to some of these environments, we will start giving you some demonstrations on it, showing you the capabilities and flexibilities of it as well. Project Oak or Power Oak would have been called, David. Yeah. So other great thing to hear is the return to workplace solution, which David presented earlier on, is now at version 1.1. If you're not too sure what this is, it was in, David, just correct me, was it in the last meetup that we did this on, or was it the one before that? Okay, so the last meetup, yeah. So just go onto the YouTube channel and then just watch the August session and you'll get some information on the return to workplace solution. And we have now added the ability to include floors in your buildings. Before we were just able to cater for single building. Now we're able to cater for individual floors, as well as give employees the ability to reserve their space. Because as we know, when we start returning to work, a lot of offices can only have a certain amount of their employees in the office at any given point in time. What reservations enables is it gives people the ability to go and book space in the office. That way you don't end up with too many people coming through to the office to try and get some work done. And at least that way we're sticking to the guidelines and everything else. So check out this updated solution. If you have already deployed it, there is an update process that you can go through to get it implemented, bring in the new features and that. So this should help a lot. Yeah. There is also another event that we want to mention, and that's the Biz Apps launch event that's happening on October 1st. It is a bit late for us. It's starting 6 o'clock in the evening to 8 o'clock in the evening. So it's not too bad. It's still doable. But there's in these events, there's usually a lot of great info that's shared of new things that are coming, both in the Dynamics 365 space as well as in the Power Platform space. So you'll get to see some of these new features, hear and understand the value that they're going to be adding to your businesses, and just get a better understanding of what the roadmap looks like for these tool sets. There is going to be a keynote by James Phillips, who's the president of the Microsoft Business Applications Group. And then there's going to be a bunch of Microsoft experts there also to handle some Q&A that you may have. So register for the events. Once again, you'll be able to access this through microsoft.com/events. Next one, also, I think it's along the lines of Power Automate, so David's session a bit later. We have released new triggers as well as actions for SharePoint. And these ones are focused on being able to identify if a field or a property has changed on a specific file or on an item in a library and a list. Okay, so in the past, it was very difficult. You had to write some very complex workflows to be able to identify what has changed on an item since it was last updated. So this really helps. You can see we've got a new trigger, which is when an item or file is modified, a new action, so get changes for an item or a file property specifically. And then you've got the various items. So I can say, okay, has column changed and is looking for the ID, or the column name is ID, title, price, owner. And you can also check since version number and until version number, and if it is the current version of the file. So this is going to help a lot, makes our workflows a lot less complex, a lot less complicated, and it's something that's been asked for a while. Next, we've also have now the ability, this is currently in preview, but you now have the ability to export and import Power Virtual Agent bots that you are creating in the solution. So if you go into the settings control in Power Virtual Agents canvas, you'll be able to go to the import export bots, and then you're going to go to Power App Solutions. And then what that gives you the ability to do is export that solution and bring it into another environment. So this works well, especially when you want to do complete application lifecycle management for your bots. You want to make sure you're bringing in the governance, the controls, the data residency and latency requirements for your chatbots that you are building out. So this is a great feature. It is currently in preview, so it might still be a bit buggy. But for those of you who have been asking for this, you have the ability to now go in, test it out, and give us feedback on how well it works or if it doesn't work. Lastly is around Power Apps portals that we've brought in web API support. Once again, that's also in preview. But what this web API gives you the ability to do is do all those CRUDs changes to entities in your CDS directly from the web portal, so from Power Apps portals. So you can go create entries, update entries, delete entries, and also associate and disassociate entities that are built in on that CDS. Okay, and I think that's it from my side. I just want to check from anyone else on the floor. Is there any news that anyone else has heard about? Okay, perfect.
Sorry for taking so long. They moved the mute button on the Teams client for Mac, so every time it takes me a while to find it. And I think you've covered it. I think there's some enhancements to the connector, which we'll discuss a little bit later.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, David. Okay, so I just want to see if Duke is on the call.
Yes, hi there.
Hi, Duke.
Hi, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. Good, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you, if you don't mind just doing a brief introduction for the team, and then you should have the ability to share your screen now as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be part of today's community call. And I also want to thank Michael O'Donovan for the invite. So for those who don't know me already, my name is Duke. I'm technical specialist for Biz Apps from Microsoft Germany. So for today's session, I would like to share some best practices, tips and tricks when it comes to UI and UX driven Power Apps, Canvas apps. So that you are empowered also during customers meeting to get your customers more excited when it comes to eye candy apps, and also how to create eye candy applications very quick and fast. And let me share my screen with you so that I can show you some of features and functionalities when it comes to UI UX. You should see my screen shortly.
Yeah, it's up on the side.
Great. So before we start off with some of the best practices, let me just show you some differences between UI and UX, because this is something most of us maybe don't know, or maybe it's very hard to distinguish. So I got this slide from our GBB. And it's very interesting because when it comes to UI, for example, it's more about on colors, how you scheme your screen, also how you place all these elements inside your app so that it comes to, this is how, when we are talking about eye candiness. And user experience is more on when it comes, if you are focusing on how, what kind of processes is behind the app. So if you would like to design an app, and it should be easy to use, and it also should be very handy so that there are no loss of data quality, for example, then in this case, you would like to focus on user experience. So when you're talking with customers, maybe you might think about, okay, on what kind of feature I would like to focus most. It's more on user interface, or when it comes to pre-sales discussions, and also to on beautiful apps, then you would like to focus on user interface. But when it comes to more deeper discussion, for example, when it comes to databases, you would like to connect data, aggregate data in one screen. In this case, you might focus on user experience. And the great thing on designing an app is actually there's like some sort of scheme where you can focus on. So when it comes, for example, to Power Canvas apps for desktop, in this case, you would like to use this kind of screen here where the navigation is more on the left-hand side, and you can also focus on the screen area here. For example, in the middle of the screen, there should be the core information, like main information, for example, when it comes to lists view, and also when it comes to, I would like to handle with data, interact with data. In this case, you would put it more in the center of the screen, and on the above, you might focus on like displaying information, or when it comes to user profiles. So you can structure your screens in like 3 different areas, like navigation, core elements of information, and also just like display information. And the same structure can also be used for mobile applications as well. So in this case, for mobile apps, you would like to focus on the navigation bar more on the bottom, and in the middle where the thumb can also reach the area of movement. In this case, we would like to focus on data where you can interact, and on the very top of this, you can focus on functions and features, functionalities where the thumb should not be in that a lot of action when it comes to interacting with your Canvas app. And when designing this kind of structure, designing this kind of elements on your Canvas screen, what I use is PowerPoint actually. So this is like a really good starting point when I come with this customers and I talk to them like, hey, with Power Apps, you can design apps starting with PowerPoint, and you just could transfer your PowerPoint screens into Power Apps. And this is like something where the customers think like, oh, no way, I can't believe that. Please show me. And this is very easily, actually. You can just design, for example, this kind of screen where you put all these elements from PowerPoint. So you can use these shapes and forms and also use gradient colors. You can also, there's nice functionalities where you can use, work with PowerPoint also to get the colors of the customers and also do some gradient effects, shadow effects, and so on. So these kind of effects are very beautiful, and you can also put them here into PowerPoint screen. And at the end, when you finish your screen, you can simply group them and save them as a picture. And if you save this picture somewhere, you can also then import this picture into a Power Apps Canvas app so that you can redesign this screen here into Canvas app. So I will show you a short example. Once I've built a mixed reality functionality, a mixed reality app where the customer would like to have this kind of starting point to choose this kind of different options, and they would like to, based on the options they choose, they would like to start the mixed reality feature inside a Power Apps Canvas app. And what I've done is I just create a shape. This is like this kind of four squared thing here, and then you can use these kind of effects to create these kind of 3D elements, and then use the configuration properties to change the colors and also the gradients and so on. And then after that, I just save this picture here and import this picture into Power Apps Canvas apps. And at the end, it will look like this. So as you know, maybe as I know, as most of you already work with Power Apps Canvas apps with the Power Apps Maker Studio Designer. So this is a great way where you can start, and also when you're talking with the customer, to import these kind of elements inside Canvas apps. So you can start here with the background image, and I also use this kind of backgrounds here from PowerPoint and upload it here inside this Canvas app here. Let me use one example. For example, this kind of background image. And once it's uploaded, you will see it will also fit here to the screen, and you can also use the properties and also to change everything based on the design what you have done with the PowerPoint. And the same thing also comes with these kind of buttons and elements, and everything what you see here is just images. I use these images from PowerPoint to upload everything here into Canvas app, and then you can reuse them also for your buttons as buttons, or maybe also as a list of different information you would like to display. I can also share the PowerPoint design elements here with you guys after the course, so that you can also reuse some of those elements here and also see what the structure is behind. So as you see, for example, for the right screen, or when it comes to web screens, just focus here more in the middle for your interactive information, and everything navigation bar is more maybe on the left, but in this case I only use buttons. So this is when it comes to user experience. In this case, if you would like to approach your customer with the step-by-step screen, which is, or the user with the step-by-step screen, then you can also put the buttons more on the bottom. So these kind of structures can I use them also here in my Power App screens, and where you can also get some very interesting inspirations, or maybe when it comes to you would like to get some idea how you can design the screens and what kind of colors you would like to use. In this case, I recommend you to use Dribbble, for example. Dribbble, I love this platform, Dribbble, very much, because you can find like everything kind of UI, UX driven mockups, which you can also download, and you can also, for example, rebuild them on PowerPoint. So for example, if I would like to rebuild this kind of application, you can then go to PowerPoint here and rebuild it. And in this case, let me just show you how I would rebuild that. So in this case, for example, I would like to rebuild this screen. So I just take this element here. For example, I would like to have this bar, and I take this bar, and I can also use the tools here to get the colors here as well. I can also make it a little bit bigger, and by this you can easily build your elements and also build your kind of buttons you need for your Power App, and then at the end just import it, export it to as an image, and import it into Power Apps Canvas apps. So this is quite simple, but everything is, as you see, it looks simple, but everything at the end it's more learning by doing. So what I would recommend you is to, for example, you search or research for some beautiful UI UX driven apps, rebuild them, or use some reusable assets here, like the PowerPoint I will share with you, and you can also then build these kind of applications very easy, very fast by using just export and import to Power Canvas App Studio. Any questions so far?
No, none from my side, other to say that this is awesome. Thanks for sharing, Duke. This is really cool. I see a lot of people in the comments are also going on. There's a lot of great info. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. One last thing, maybe, which is also really cool and very interesting, is when it comes to animation. You can also show the customers sort of animation by using GIFs, for example. So GIF is a very cool way to animate this kind of applications. In this case, let me show you an example. I think I've put it somewhere, or maybe you can also show it here. Okay, in this case, I don't have it, but you can also use GIF to animate, for example, this kind of buttons. And if you use these GIFs inside Power Apps Canvas Studio, you can also do some nice eye candy GIF animations to highlight some information, highlight maps, icons, for example. So it's a very cool way to make your app more native.
Oh, great. That's some great tips. Is there any questions for Duke from anyone? Feel free to come off mute and ask.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, this is very cool. Duke, so is Dribbble the first place that you usually go to look for ideas around layout and styling and these sort of things?
Yes.
Or do you have do you have others as well?
There are also others. Let me show it here in this presentation. There's, for example, Dribbble, but we have also Behance and also Pinterest, where you can also search for some designs and inspirations. From my side, I prefer Dribbble more because this is a really big community focusing only on UI and UX for web designs and also app designs. And often they also share their assets for free, so you can also download some of their elements as well, but you can also just rebuild them. What I also use, for example, for icons, for example, in this case I recommend you to use a flat icon. It's actually it's for free if you credit the author or maybe the creator of the icons. But you can also, if you use it for just internal purposes or just for demonstrations, which is not public shown, then you can also use these kind of icons here. For example, I would like to look for a Microsoft icon. Then you will find different variations of Microsoft, like these, which is more, looks kind of cute, so to say. So you can also do this kind of colorful apps by using these kind of icons and also use them, import them as an image into Power Canvas App Studio to create buttons, for example, or alerts or this kind of information.
Karika, you've got a question on your side?
Yes, thanks, Jonathan. Duke, I just wanted to ask, it looks really amazing. Thank you for showing that, what you have so far. I just wanted to ask, do you find that using the images the way that you do, does it affect the performance of your Power App at all?
Actually not, because I group all these images as one. So you will try to group as many pictures as one element as possible, because if you put like over, let's say, 30 elements into or objects into Power Apps Canvas App Studio, then you might have some sort of performance issues or maybe performance lags only when creating an app, but not opening the app.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, but you just take, for example, I have this screen, so I put this background screen and also this kind of bar here as one image and import it into Power Apps, and then it's feeling good. So there are no performance issues in this case.
Cool.
Thanks. Michael, you got a question?
I've actually forgotten what my question was, but I do want to just say thanks to Duke for doing this for us. Dude, this is awesome, man. It's really cool. I love it. I absolutely love it. I think, like, just for me, instead of going and building the full app, you know, kind of inside of Power Apps, I find this really useful for kind of giving mock-ups and saying this is what it might look like and this is how it might work, and getting feedback. And then from there, like, just changing it in PowerPoint instead of the actual Power App. And then going forward, then snipping the pieces that make sense and adding them to images to the Power App, and then using them. So I think this is absolutely phenomenal. Maybe a question. It's kind of like you make it look really simple. Like what's tricky? What are the pieces that, like, I guess we got to watch out for? Like, could you go overboard? And you know, I'm not a guru in user experience or UIs, so like I just add too much, or do I have to be careful of, I don't know, the size of the background image, or having a background image on every screen and it doesn't really need to be, there's less more. I don't know, I'm just rambling on, but
yeah, so everything is at the end, it's like learning by doing, but you can focus on, or if you create an app, you might focusing only on a main color, for example, and also try to make apps in a very contrast way, which means like you have like dark background but very light elements in the front, or maybe also dark, or you have like one main color in the background and you have like maximum of 3 sub colors in this. So this is like a guide where I focus on when creating an app, that you choose a main color and do not choose more than 3 based on the main color, not more than 3 sub colors from the main color. And next to the main colors, you also have these kind of alert colors, which means like a red is like, like the traffic light system, red and green and yellow, or you can also make variations like red and purple and blue, for example. So these are sort of guidelines where I get some orientation so that the app does not look too full blown and also not too messy, but still clean. And also if you have the feeling that your app looks too messy, then you might focus on, okay, maybe you put more white backgrounds in it. And try also to reduce the information inside one screen by using 2 screens in the end. It's also fine to having, instead of one screen, you have 2 screens. In this case, you would like switch from one screen to the next screen, which is also a sort of user experience, which is also fine, since you would like to have like a step-by-step app instead of an app where all buttons are shown in one screen, which is also very confusing. So yeah, this is like the guidance what I'm oriented.
okay. And sorry, just another question. Like, there's 2 different views out there when I speak to people. Some people say, like, first build the app, don't worry about what it looks like, just make sure it works, and then make it look, pretty. And I guess it's not just pretty for being pretty, but it's like making it simpler to use. Do that second, after you've got it working. And the other one is, design the UI first, make it appealing and functional, and then only go and overlay it with the real functionality of connecting to the databases, etc. How do you typically do it?
Yeah, it depends on the use case, actually. So if you have a very simple use case and you have this kind of idea how it looks like, then you can also already focus in the mock-up on how it looks. So typically in the app development, you have like some sort of vision, and in this, based on the vision, you will then structure your elements and key and pieces inside your application, and you can think about like, okay, will I focus now on the UI first, and then or will I focus on the data first so it works, and then on the UI? So from my side, when it comes to customers meetings, I focus more on the UI side, because the customers don't know Power Apps, and if they see like, oh, it looks very fancy, it looks very cool, then they're very, they're still delightful, and also are still interested in the Power Apps. But if you're working like, because I got the experience when I worked with Power Apps, and I only focused on the functions and also the capabilities of Power Apps with not that eye-candy elements, and I got the feeling like, okay, it looks still very like a programming tool where I need to be an expert in programming, for example. But in the other way around, if you make it more beautiful first and then put everything inside the app, then it can also work during having a beautiful app and also a working app, because you have like a low code, no code, right? So you don't have to focus on the coding. So you can focus on beautiful elements and also get the functionalities right on spot.
Yeah, Michael, I think that also it depends on where the dragons are. You know, so if there are some things that you potentially have that are issues from a technical perspective, you know, first address those. From experience, you know, it's very easy to get a project to 80%, but then that last 20% becomes an issue if you left the dragons for last. So one thing I can just add as well is, Duke, do you use SVG images at all?
SVG also works. Yeah, vector graphics, right? Also works. Yeah, you can also import SVG files inside Power Apps Canvas App Studio, which is also even better, because if you make, for example, this is not an SVG file, just a normal image file. If you make it bigger, oh, not SVG, but if you take another image, for example, that one, you will see the bigger it is, the more, the less quality it will get. So SVG files also works fine, and when it comes to background images, or when also using icons, you can also use these kind of files as well.
Excellent. So just on that topic, there's a very nice SVG component that a guy has generated on the community. I'm going to paste a link into the chat. But that allows you to very easily create like UI fabric icons for Power Apps. And there are, I think there's 1,800 or 2,000 of these things that you can very easily create SVG code for, and then you can just put it in an HTML control in your Power App, and that works wonders as well for look and feel of the app.
Great.
Because I think that the icons on Power Apps are a little bit limited at the moment. I don't know, you know, it feels like something they can quite easily expand on. But until that time, you know, this SVG generator works wonders.
You can also, alternatively, you can also take the icon, in German it's Piktogramme, so I think if the English version is pictograms or something like that. You can also use these kind of icons here, and they will also be saved. If you export them as an image, they will also be stored in your device as a SVG file per default. So
Okay,
it also
excellent.
works here, yeah. And one thing maybe I would like to stress out is when it comes, for example, to showing Power Apps on the web screen. What you can also do is, maybe you already know that, but just to show it here again, if you hover on one of those elements inside a gallery, you can also use these kind of transitions to pop or to push, which makes also some sort of small animations. These are little piece elements, but they have a high effect when it comes to presentation. So if you hover on those and you have latest the transition using pop, then you will see that it will pop out, and you can also take the same for push. So based on the use case, you can also have different kind of hover elements here in the gallery, which is also very nice.
Excellent. Dick, just one more question sorry, Mike, you put up your hand first. You can go.
I think his hand's still up from earlier, to be honest.
Correct.
Yeah, sorry. They should make it painful to put up your hand, so you pull it down when it's you're done asking. So.
This hand doesn't get tired. Karika, do you also have a question?
Nope, I've asked my question.
Awesome. So, Duke, the Fluent UI system, do you use that much?
The Fluent UI system. What's that exactly?
So that's the Microsoft Fluent Design. I'm just going to put a link in the chat to that as well. So it's like a framework of design methodology.
That one. Yes. I heard about that recently. Also really cool. This is a really cool one. I just got that last week, and I'm still researching and experiencing this design page here. It's very interesting. So especially the icons here, you can also use them. So it's really good one. So you can also use them next, besides the dribble, and also and this kind of other Pinterest, for example, pages. I think the Fluent UI icons are very nice.
Awesome. Thanks, Duke. Really appreciate you sharing so much. There's some great tips and tricks you've shared, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of.
Great, thanks.
Really appreciate your time this afternoon.
Okay, so if you have any questions, just contact me, and I will share my presentation here inside the chat. The PowerPoint presentation will be updated regularly, so every time when I have a new idea of app design, you can also just take a look on the PowerPoint presentation, and you might find some new concepts. You can also reuse them.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, this is an external audience, so what we can, is it okay for us to share this on the Meetup sites with the audience?
If it works.
Okay. No, well, I can download the PowerPoint, and then we'll share it directly there with them. And we'll just see when updates are happening, and then we'll send the updates through.
Duke, and if the guys wanna follow you on social streams, where would they go?
That would be LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, okay.
Yeah, I can also share my link if you want to. So you can also find me here on the aks.com. So feel free to connect with me, so we can also keep in touch.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Duke. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, David, I think it's over to you.
Yeah, I think in future I'm going to start presenting first. So when the guest speakers present, then I don't have to try and beat what they did, because this is awesome, Dick. Thank you very much for that. Right, so let me share my screen.
Yeah, Jesse, just to your message, that link will only work for internal Microsoft employees. So what I will do is I will download, and then we'll post it onto the meetup.com site. Okay.
Perfect. Right, so can everybody see my screen?
It's coming up. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so I've got a SharePoint site that doesn't look half of as exciting as Duke's Power Apps. But essentially what this is doing is it's just a very straightforward SharePoint list that's used for a purchase requisition system. So think of it like you go and create a request, it will get approved, and then as it's approved, it will get a purchase order number assigned to it. Now, what typically happens is on the Power Automate flow, and yes, if you create a flow in Power Automate, it's still called a flow and not a Power Automate. If you go and create a flow, that'll then pick up that new record and then assign a number to it. That works fine. But if you then use a trigger to modify, or to trigger whenever the record is modified, to then go and modify the same record again, you could find that typically your numbering would kick off numerous times, and the modification of the item would trigger the flow to run again, and that could be a bit of a mess. So let me show you what I mean. So let's go and create a new purchase requisition, and let's say we want to buy some tires. and it's going to cost us $1,000, like they did in the good old days. All right, so if we save that, in a few minutes, there will, or a few seconds, there'll be a PO request reference number, Power Automate, that'll kick off, and that will actually go and get a sequential number and then assign it to the list item. So that takes a few minutes or a few seconds usually. While that triggers, I'm just going to show you what the first flow looks like. And so this one is using when an item is created, and then we're connecting to an online platform called Agility to generate a sequential number based on certain rules. And then we actually update the SharePoint list item with that new number. And if we go back, we'll see that this is now PA or PO REQ1. All right, so that's the request reference, and that's working well. And because we're using the when an item is created trigger in Power Automate, it only triggers once. It won't go into the loop that I referred to earlier. The problem now comes in when we want to actually create another Power Automate or another flow that will go and assign it that second number. So, or the number or the purchase order number as soon as it's approved. So let's go and create this. I'm going to say purchase order number, and we're going to say when an item is created or modified, and this is the one that creates that issue. All right, so we're going to select our SharePoint list or site, and our list is called purchase orders. Now, next we're going to connect to Agility, and we're going to generate a number. So the profile key, I think, is PO purchase, I think. We don't need any additional properties, and now we're just going to take that value and write that back into SharePoint. So let's go and say update. With this list growing every time, it's never where we're used to finding it. So there's update item right at the bottom. So we're going to find the list again. So we're going to update purchase orders, and we're going to update the one that triggered the flow to run, right? And we're just going to write all of these fields back into it. If there's any questions, give us a shout. So,
I was just about to say, you don't have to complete all the fields. If fields don't change, they will stay the same on update.
Yeah, I think in the past that I've got burned by that. So especially, things like this approved one as an example, the default is no. So if you don't change that, it'll actually go and change that to no. So it's just a habit doing that. So request reference. So as this one as an example, again, the default for this column is to be assigned. And if I don't update that, it'll actually update the list item again, which is a bit of a nightmare. All right, so the purchase reference is the one we want to set now with the result that we got back from Agility. All right, so let's go and save that. And if we now go back to our item, the moment that we now save this, well, there's two problems here, essentially. If I go and create another one, let's say we want to buy some batteries, and that's going to cost us $500. That second flow is now also going to trigger because it's also going to notify or get notified of a new item that was created or modified. So the problem here is we're going to get the purchase reference before it was actually approved, and that's something we don't want to do. So that's the first issue. But then the second one is, you'll see it in a second, is as soon as it gives it a number, it's going to trigger itself, and that number is just going to continue on running and just use your flow runs. and well, and obviously increment the numbers. So you definitely don't want to see that happening. When you save the Power Automate, it does give you this warning. I don't know if you've seen this before, where it says actions in this flow may result in an infinite trigger loop. But then, it tells you to add the appropriate condition checks to prevent this flow from triggering itself. If you ignore this, it will do it. It's just as simple as that. It's not forgiving, right? So we'll see there we got a purchase order number, and that's 1, and it should trigger itself in a second. And the more it triggers itself, it just keeps on running into perpetuity. Well, I think actually at some stage it times out, but it's not. It takes a while for that to happen. See, now it's on purchase order number 2 already, so it's already fired it off twice, and that also happened before we approved it. So that's what we now want to use the trigger conditions for, to get more control over when that runs. So I'm going to edit this Power Automate flow and just show you in the old days what we would have had to do was to put in a condition after the trigger. So we would have had to go and say, go and check certain criteria, and if it's true, then only execute the logic, but if it's not, then halt the flow. The issue with that is that would still use a flow run. So from a capacity perspective and your licensing, that would have been an issue, because it would continuously use these flow runs to check conditions, and then if it's false, not do anything. So that's definitely not ideal. All right, so what we can do, and this is pretty cool, this is available on the SharePoint connector as well as on the SQL connector, for an example. You can go and say you want to go into the settings of the trigger. I sort of hide this a little bit, but then at the bottom you'll see that there are trigger conditions. So over here, if we go and say add a trigger condition, you need to go and actually write the expression to evaluate whether a condition is true or false. And IntelliSense isn't built into this yet. So if you go and say trigger body, it's not going to pick up anything. So it's important that you make sure that your expression is 100% accurate before you actually start with the writing it into this area. And the quickest or the easiest way that I find to do that is just to go and put a compose action in here. And then you can actually go and write the expression that you're looking for and tweak it, make sure it works, and then you actually only implement it into your trigger. So typically to do that, you'll go and just delete the rest of the logic or disable them. So let's make sure that that doesn't run again. Let's do that. And now we can go and write our formula. So what we're going to use for this is we're going to fetch the trigger body. Okay, there we go. And we're going to say we're going to find first of all, we're going to find the approved or purchased approved. Okay, so that's going to connect to that field, and then find that field in the trigger, and then actually evaluate that. So if I now go and say click on OK. So sometimes what happens, this is a you've seen this, but
quotes there
in the beginning. So sometimes what happens is, even if your formula is fine, like this one now is, it still doesn't take it the first time. It's almost like it first needs to write that expression to the server before you click on OK. Otherwise, it evaluates against an outdated expression. I don't know if you guys experience that problem as well. But essentially, if you now go and run this, so I can just go and say, test this against the previous run. And we'll see that that's getting a false, and that is true. It hasn't been approved yet. So that's exactly the right formula that we're looking for so far. So now we can tweak that further. So we can go and say that if that equals true, then we only want this to trigger. So we can go and update that. So when I work with expressions, I like to do it in these increments to make sure that your base is solid. Because if you start off with this very long, complex expression and it doesn't work, then typically there might be an issue. All right, so that's returning false as well because the property isn't currently false. So that's true. A little bit confusing, but let's go and copy that. And oh, it didn't save that. Okay, that's what I spoke about earlier, where before you click on update, it hasn't committed that to the server yet. So then just copy that. Okay, let's just run that again to make sure that that's working fine. Okay, that seems to be fine. I just want to make sure that it did save. Yes, all right, that's perfect. Okay, so the first trigger condition we're now going to put in is that one. So we're going to say that should only trigger when the trigger body or the field in the trigger body, which is purchased approved, equals true. All right, so that's important. But now if I click on done, you'll see that it should. Okay, didn't. So sometimes I have seen this as well before, where it actually wants you to actually think it's only when you save the flow, where it says that well, that's right. So the condition expression isn't valid, even though you've made perfectly sure in compose that it is valid. And the reason for that is you need to tell it that this is going to be a formula. So you need to put an at in front of the actual expression before it evaluates as a formula. So if you now go and click on done and save that, it's now going to save it correctly, which it is. Right, and if we now test this, there's no reason to test it really. But if we want to go and add another piece of logic, we might want to say that we also want to check that it hasn't received a number already. So we only want it to trigger on the first run. So if we say that we want to set the purchase reference, we want to check the purchase reference, and it should only run when it's called, when the value is to be assigned. Otherwise, we know that we've already given it a number, and then we don't need to worry about that. So typically, if we go and save that, it should evaluate properly as well, which it does. And now we can actually go and add the rest of our logic to go and fetch the number. And then stamp it into the record. So generate number, it's the PO purchase, and we're then going to update that item. Purchase orders ID is going to be that. Title is necessary, so we need to specify that. The rest isn't that important, although that is. Just set that to approved. And we don't want to reset that, so this needs to be request reference. And now we're going to write the result into that. Let's go and save it, make sure it runs. Okay, perfect. We get that warning, but now we've handled that warning, and that shouldn't be an issue any further. Okay, so let's see where this thing stopped. So purchase 8, so that's fine. So it's going to write another one. So we want to buy some fuel, right? And that's the most expensive out of all of these things. So let's go and save that. And now if we go back into that Power Automate, it should now run momentarily. And it should give it a request number, which is the first one, but it shouldn't give it a purchase order number because we haven't approved it yet. And that approval you could then do through multiple ways. You can use the native approvals or a workflow engine, whatever the case may be. But as soon as that field approved is then set to yes, then only will that flow trigger. So let's go and check schedules. Okay, so it got the request number, which is now up here REQ3, which is perfect. And we'll see that the second flow won't run. So it won't action anything on that purchase order number until the requisition is approved. So if we now go back into the record and we say that it's approved. And now in theory, this should run and give it the number in a second or two. While we wait for that, anybody with any questions at this stage?
Manny wants to know, what does IT stand for?
In theory.
But this is a very cool tip. I like this.
Well, that's if it works. It hasn't worked yet.
So like, just if I replay, what you're saying is a trigger condition is almost like putting an if statement like right on that trigger to say, but actually only trigger if this is true or whatever.
Exactly.
So only, don't just trigger because there's a new record, trigger because there's a new record and, you know, the purchase order number is bigger than 50,000. Otherwise, don't trigger this.
Exactly.
Instead of putting it as a condition kind of after the trigger, you make it part of the trigger and then it actually just doesn't trigger at all.
Exactly. Precisely that. So if it doesn't trigger at all, it won't show up as a flow run. So it won't consume any of your capacities or anything like that. It'll just not do anything. So it's almost like telling it only monitor a specific field or condition. And if that's not true, don't trigger at all.
Okay. Makes sense.
So there we go. It's now triggered once and it will only trigger once because it's now, even though the approved is yes, it'll notice that the purchase reference isn't to be assigned anymore, which is the default. And so it won't trigger at all for that record. Perfect. So that's the run, and rest assured it won't trigger again. Any other questions?
That looks good, David. Thanks for sharing. It's a great tip.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so next we've got Michael. You got your cookbook open that you want to come through with.
Yeah. My cookbook today. Let's just make sure I'm opening the right things here. There we go. You can see my desktop, right?
Yes, yeah. Take the daily health check.
Okay, cool. So generally what happens, this Michael's cookbook thing, is questions that I inevitably ask David because I'm struggling with something or I don't understand something, and I feel others may benefit from that. So I've been playing quite a bit with the return to work solution, and part of the return to work solution is this Canvas Power App. And one of the nice things about this Canvas Power App is it looks fairly good. So I was thinking about, you know, Duke's session, and yeah, this is one of the first kind of like sample apps that really looks quite nice and is kind of well thought through. But that wasn't the point of the cookbook. The point of the cookbook was, I don't understand what they're doing in this Canvas app. So usually what happens is when I build apps that need to update data sources, I either use a form, and you know, it's just a stock standard form control, or I don't use a form control and I put on like a bunch of text boxes or whatever it is. I manually put them on a screen, and then I use a patch command to update the data in the back end. But this was doing something quite weird, in my opinion anyway, because I've never seen this before. And I noticed on every single screen, they've got what they call a canvas control, okay? And then inside that canvas control is one data card control. And this is what they're doing on every single screen. So if I go to the check-in facilities, there's this canvas control, which takes up the entire screen. And then within it is just one data card control. And then within the data card, you actually see the different controls that make up the screen. So your start and cancel buttons, etc. So I'm like, what on earth is going on here? Why are they doing this? Because data cards I usually only see inside of a form. And when you use a form, you also don't use patch. Whereas actually what they do here is they do use patch. So I'm not quite sure what they're doing with data cards, why they're here in this way. And also, I've never heard of this canvas control before. In actual fact, if you pop over to the right-hand side here, you'll see it's actually called a fluid grid. That's actually the type of control it is. I've never heard of a fluid grid. And looking around on the interweb and YouTube, I didn't find much either. So I asked David, dude, please explain to me what is a canvas control or fluid grid control and a data card control, because I can't even find these to add to a screen. So if I go and create my own screen, I can't add them. So I don't know if you've got some insight there, dude.
Cool. So yes, so essentially the data card, like you say, is typically used on a form, and then it just makes the whole process of patching and these sort of things a lot easier, because it controls the value of the controls inside of it, and then you can map that to values in the data source. But in this instance, it's not used for that at all. And so what they do is you'll see if you create a new screen. So just on your screen, just go and say new screen at the top, and then say scrollable screen, which is the second screen. So,
okay, I'm too fast. I added a normal screen, and in here I couldn't figure out how to add any of these controls.
yeah,
so let's create a scrollable screen.
Scrollable screen, yeah. All right, so there you'll see on the left-hand side, if you expand the controls on that screen, you'll see that it puts a canvas in there automatically. And if you expand the canvas, you'll see that there is a card inside of that canvas. So that's exactly the point of it. So what you can now do is the canvas holds the cards, and then the cards essentially gives you a scrollable area. So if there's a header in your field or your form that you want to put at the top, that regardless of whether people scroll off the screen, you still want to show them that. That could be on the top of the screen, and then you could have another one at the bottom where that has all of your components on it. And then essentially that could have the controls for the data, so that you want to scroll around by not affecting the actual header information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so essentially what you're saying is like this stuff at the top of the screen here will remain static. It'll stay put. And then whatever's in here with the scroll bar, this can be scrollable.
Yes, correct.
And my data card in this case is just really like a container, but that's it. It's providing no capability really. I just go now add controls into the data card.
Yes, exactly. And why that's a good idea. So if you have apps that need to respond differently on different screen sizes and all of these sort of things, this could also help you a bit. So you'll see your XY coordinates are all relative to the card. So you don't need to worry as much about the positioning on the layout of the screen. You just need to make sure the card and the canvas is in the right place, and then everything in it will respond accordingly.
Okay, cool beans. Maybe one day we can do a more detailed session on these canvas and data cards. I guess you don't have to use them. I've never used them before, and I'm getting on okay, I think. But it was pretty interesting that this app used them, and I'm like, why on earth are they using, oh, I was in the app, sorry. Why on earth are they doing this? But essentially it sounds like they created scrollable screens and therefore they got this canvas and the data card, and then they just went and added controls onto the data card.
Yes. So a while back, we used to use this for tabs, but subsequently we found a better way of doing it. But we used to have multiple canvases for multiple tabs on a screen. But it's awesome if you need the scrollable stuff. But if you're not going to have scrollable content or those sort of things, I don't really think it's necessary.
Cool, awesome. That's it from me. Thanks, David.
Cool, awesome. Thanks for the question.
Can I maybe add a question on that?
Yes, please, Tim.
I've always kind of struggled to figure out how to make sure if I, for example, add a button, that it goes onto the correct card or canvas or screen. And then if it goes to the wrong one, how do you move it around?
Yeah, so some of them you can't move. So depending on where you want to put it into, you can't move it. You have to create it inside of it. Although I have seen that's becoming less and less of a problem. It's almost like, as the platform matures, they sort of get to those small little nigglies. But is there a specific example, Monet, or are you just talking in general?
It's Tiania. So, for example, the
Tian.
screen that Michael was sharing there, for example, I added a button like that cancel one, and it actually shouldn't have been on inside the data card. It should have been on the screen level.
Okay, so some of them you can cut and paste. So usually if you put it inside of a card and then onto a screen, that typically works fine. But sometimes the other way around, it's not entirely happy with it, especially if you want to copy and paste certain things into galleries or these sort of things. Then, some of these things I've seen in the past that you have to create inside of the control. So like Michael is demonstrating there, he's now pasting it directly onto the screen, and then that works like a charm. And I think for that button perspective, putting it back into the card should also work fine. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so cut and paste is kind of the way to handle that. Cool.
Yeah, so it's that.
I felt like I was creating an animated GIF there. I can go for an infinite loop here. Yeah.
You just go into a loop. So Tian, one other thing to just keep in mind is if you're now going to the data card, so I usually go and select a control inside of the data card, whether that data card is in a form or in a gallery. It works very similar. I think the technology in the back end between a gallery and a form is actually very similar in the way that it structures the cards. But essentially, if you select a control inside of the gallery or inside of the card, then that card is automatically put in an edit mode. So if you then insert anything into the screen, then it will happen inside of that card. Where if you just select it at the top level, it doesn't automatically put it in edit mode. So if you then insert something, then it doesn't put it inside of it.
All right, cool, thanks.
Cool, any other questions? Just on this app that you've got open your mic, so on these Canvas apps, I can see that just the overall way that these apps are being developed is changing significantly, and it's actually becoming less complex. I don't know if you've noticed it as well. Some of the other templates and stuff on the Canvas apps used to be very, very complex in the back end. Where these ones are simplified quite a bit. I don't know if this is something that Microsoft is doing intentionally, but I've noticed it in some of the new apps that they're churning out.
Do you think it might just be because it's easier to get some of these things done now?
Yeah, I think it might be that. And I think that a very, very simple example is, back in the days, you would typically have a shape for your header, and then you would go and put a label inside of the shape. Where I've seen lately, people would just go and have that label and shape, and then would just put the fill and everything directly in the label, which makes it so you save on a control, which is awesome. And I wonder if, as people have built more and more Power Apps, these things have become more and more complex, and with more complexity and more controls, you lose performance. And I think it's actually a drive now for people to build apps with less controls, on purpose.
Try and simplify it, improves the performance, makes it easier to understand what is going on. So I think it's especially important for templates.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you sharing that or bringing that up. That definitely helps a lot of people, I'm sure. Karika, is there a question from your side?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, I don't know how deeply you've played with the Power App that was just demonstrated. I just wanted to find out if you guys at all tried, where you can like book your spot for the day or that functionality in there. Can you filter on the meeting rooms or office space that's available? Like only show certain, like if you want to build it specifically for the IT department, only show the desks or things that the IT department can access.
I haven't myself. Michael, on your side, have you played around with that yet?
So that capability doesn't exist, I believe. So we've just released 1.1 and there's 1.2 and 1.3 planned, and I believe that's coming as a standard feature.
Okay.
So when you reserve your space, the space will have a limit to it. So it's like there's only 50 seats or 50 desks. So if it's, all 50 are taken up, you can't even go and try and book them. But I haven't physically seen what it looks like and how it works. Could you add something like that? You absolutely could. Should you add something like that is another question, because the only issue with customizing this specific Canvas app that I'm showing you here is that Microsoft will be releasing additional versions of it. So if you customize it and then Microsoft releases the next version, you're going to have to figure out like, now what's the difference between what I did and they've got, how do I add my customizations? So certainly possible, but just keep that in mind that as Microsoft releases additional versions of this, and they will, then how do I bring my changes in?
Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Anything else from anyone?
It's kind of like if you're gonna customize it, like, and you want that type of facility, almost like add a totally separate screen that that is encapsulating that piece of capability that you have, so that when the next one comes, you kind of you haven't customized stuff within screens, which might become more complicated. Or kind of like if you can do it as a component so you can reuse it. It's kind of these types of things you want to think about. So that it would be easy to apply when the next version of the app came out to that app.
Awesome, that's great advice. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for that, Mike. Anything from anybody else? Any general questions, comments, suggestions?
No.
Hi guys, I just want to say it's a great session tonight. Thank you everybody for presenting and preparing, and I see on the comments as well, a lot of people are also loving it. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Monet.
Thanks, Monet. Yeah, and I think maybe what did the 4 o'clock time slot do for everybody? Is it making it easier for people to attend?
From the attendance, the number of people that have attended definitely looks like it, David. Anyone got comments? Do you prefer the spots as opposed to the later slot at 6 o'clock?
Yeah, I agree. I think the 4 o'clock slot works well.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, it definitely seems like everyone's preferring, except for Michael.
No, I think Michael wants everybody to go and like the appropriate time, so either 4 or 6. So he's posting a 4 o'clock. Yeah. So far everybody is on the 4 o'clock slot. So
yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
So next one we'll probably keep it at the same time then. Hey, David, you agree?
Yeah, happy with that.
Okay, perfect. So
Yeah,
unless there's
maybe Jonathan, just before you finish off, just an ask, I guess, of everyone is that, like, we dream up topics, but if any of you want, you've done something that you want to share, like it was tough for you, or and you're learning, because sometimes we do way too advanced stuff, and you want us to cover something, or you want someone to cover something, or you want to present, like this is an awesome environment to practice your presentation skills. It's safe, and we all love each other. So yeah, like, if you've got any suggestions on future topics you want to see or you want to present, please just either leave messages in the chat window here, mail us. There's the Meetup site, so there's lots of different ways to get in touch, and yeah, please do get involved.
Yeah, as well,
Absolutely.
please. If everybody can do us a favor, we're going to start posting more of the material on the actual Power Platform UG site. So I'm just going to post the link to the Johannesburg Power Apps and Power Automate user group. So do us a favor, just go and register on there, and then all of the content from these sessions we'll make sure is always available on that site.
Perfect. Thanks, David. And I do have a copy of the presentation from Duke, so I will be sharing that as well with everyone, so everyone will have access to that. Yeah. Awesome. Karika, I see your hands up. Is that still up from earlier?
Yes, it was. Sorry about that.
Okay. No problem at all. So with that, thanks everyone for your time. I hope you found it useful. I hope you learned a couple of things. I know I did. I hope you have a great evening further, and we'll see you in the next one.
Great, thanks.
Cheers, everyone. Have a good one.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Cheers.
Cheers.